So I'm Glenn Ahrens. I'm your OSU Extension Forester here in Clackamas, Marion, and Hood River County. And I'm happy to host this evening program with our Christmas tree experts on the Christmas tree outlook for 2021. And before I introduce our speakers, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping about the Zoom room tonight. So as you can see, we're running this as a Zoom meeting rather than a webinar, and that's a distinction for especially for the presenters of just how the tools work. But that means that you do, as the audience, you have a chance to turn your microphone and your video on if you choose. Our general approach here is to ask everyone to stay muted. It's your choice if you want your video on during the presentations. And then if you would, the chat is where we want to see most of our comments and questions. We'll be minding that in the background. And I'm going to have of our three speakers, we're going to start, with one about 20-30 minutes and then have Q&A, which I will get from the chat, and then have another speaker and then another question and answer, and then also Q&A at the end. So I'd ask to really focus on using the chat for the most part, and then during the Q&A discussion, if I miss something or don't get all your questions, feel free to speak up, bring my attention to that, and also maybe to clarify anything in your questions. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. And oh, by the way, if you do have questions or concerns about the Zoom and can't find anything, you can put that in the chat too, and we'll try to help you with any technical issues. So back to introducing our speakers for tonight. So my pleasure to introduce our three speakers. So the first is Chal Langren, and Chal just retired from his position as our OSU Extension Christmas tree specialist, although we're lucky to have him continue half-time, so he's still acting as our Christmas tree specialist, but I think he gets to focus on some of the projects that he's most interested in with that half-time. And prior to becoming our Christmas tree specialist in 2008, he was our extension forester in Columbia and Washington counties for almost 30 years. Chal got his master's degree from Utah State in forest management, and then his bachelor's is from Cal State Berkeley in forestry. And then he got on with us in Oregon 42 years ago. So that's amazing, Chal. And it's been my pleasure to work with him, with you, Chal, for many years. So we're able to talk Chal into helping us with programs like this in his semi-retirement. And Gary Chastagner is our second speaker, and Dr. Gary Chastagner is a professor of plant pathology, Washington State University, works at the Research and Extension Center near Puyallup, Washington, and he's been there since 1978, so he's right in there with Chal for his many years of service, and in this case, focusing a lot on plant pathology, and particularly we know him for his work on diseases of Christmas trees, factors affecting post-harvest quality, and safety of cut Christmas trees been a focus of Gary's since 1979. And then Judy Kowalski will close it out, and she's been our biological science technician, works in the statewide Christmas tree program at the North Willamette Research and Extension Center in Aurora, and she's been there since 2008. She's got about 20 years of experience working in a variety of crops there at the North Willamette Research Extension Center, berries, ornamental nursery plants, as well as Christmas trees. And she assists with educational events and all aspects of the research projects there at North Willamette, working also at cooperative growing sites as well. So I'm really glad to have you all, Chal and Gary and Judy. And I'm going to turn the show over to Chal for the first part. And then again, we'll have breaks for a Q&A when he's done, and I'll mind the chat. So I'm going to sign off and take over, Chal. And thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I hope all of you have your dinner in hand, and we can go through our program tonight. And thank you for joining us. I'm sure we're all getting a little tired of the Zoom meetings, but hey, that's our lives for maybe a few more months. Hopefully, we're getting close to the end of this. So, a little more detail on tonight's program. I'm going to be talking a little bit about market updates, some short couple of slides. I'm going to spend the bulk of the evening talking about PGR leader control. and a little bit on some other research. Gary's going to be talking about twig weevil, seed storage, and coneworm. And Judy's going to round out the program about how to find where to find information, how to find it, and how to use it. So talking about the website and where to go for looking for more detailed information. Some of you may have been on the Christmas Tree Association short course that we had a couple of weeks ago. So there aren't a lot of more research results in the last 2 weeks. But tonight, I hope that we can go into a little more detail on some of these research projects that we talked about at the short course. And some of this will be new to those that weren't able to join the short course meeting. But certainly for my program, I'm hoping that we can get a lot more questions and discussion going. So that's my hope for tonight. And thanks for joining us. Again, Christmas Tree, talking about some updates. Wanted to start with the 2020 harvest. For most everyone I've talked to, this was one of the best years that folks can remember. Certainly started out with some COVID uncertainty. Who can open up, who can't? It was pretty clear from the beginning that the Home Depots were going to be open. The big box stores were going to be open, but it wasn't clear whether the Boy Scout lots might be open or some of these smaller service club organizations. So as time went on, we got a little more clarity about who was going to be open and closed. I mean, certainly there were U-cut farms that didn't open, and there were U-cut farms that did. I think they opened and kept open successfully and had a good season. One thing that a number of folks that I talked to have said was that there was a lot of real early season demand. I mean, before Thanksgiving even. So people were wanting trees and wanted to get out and look at something besides their computer screens, I think. And there was a real demand, I think, for getting back to some traditions and getting back to something normal and something real. So I think those are some of the comments that a number of growers have said to me as I've talked to them about the kind of summarizing the season. Prices were generally up. Some folks raised prices substantially, some just a little. Trucking and labor costs. Trucking was sometimes hard to find. Labor was up too. So kind of a mixed bag there. So despite COVID, 2020 seemed to be a great year for Christmas tree sales, and certainly 2021 is looking promising. So good news on the sales front. Meanwhile, in Europe, I want to kind of change gears and talk about what's going on in Europe, because they're usually the mirror image of us and have been for a number of years. Right now, in this last Christmas season and probably the one prior, overproduction is the name of the game for Nordmann fir in Europe. The current market, in talking to their association director, is about 45 million trees in Europe, and the current supply was 100 million. So that should sound very familiar to those of us, or those of you and us that have been in the business for a while. Even some of those numbers look surprisingly close. So in digging into that a little bit deeper, I was hearing prices as low as $5 a tree and way below production costs. So because prices had been good for a long time in Europe and in Denmark in particular, lots of people got into the business. So there was lots of new growers starting out, new plantations going in. There also was, during the last rotation cycle, they had very favorable weather in Poland, Germany, France, and Belgium. One of the things that I think Denmark has counted on in the past is some sort of a bad freeze in Poland in particular to wipe out a lot of the production that had been planted. So whatever the cause, the last 8-9 years hadn't seen those kinds of heavy freezes where a lot of trees were damaged and killed. So they were waiting for markets. So on the bright side, in Germany, they've been moving more and more to using fake trees, so that the use of artificial trees was increasing quite a bit. But this last year, they did find one little bit of silver lining in that with COVID, they were finding a lot of people not using artificial trees and switching over to real trees. So, and I think that was true in talking to some of the growers in the US as well. So a little bit of a silver lining, and I'll throw in a little riddle that a 4-year-old told me, talking about the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So if a pot of gold is at one end of the rainbow, what's at the other end? Rain. So we kind of have moved full circle with our production. So I want to focus tonight on the plant growth regulator leader control. So this has been something that I've been obsessed with probably 20 years. But we finally have a registered product that seems to be working really well, and want to spend most of my evening tonight talking about the ConShape product and how it can be used in more of an operational sense. A lot of the talks that I've been giving, at least in the past, have been sort of trials and research, and this is finally getting to the operational side, and want to share some of that information with you. We'll be talking about Noble, Nordman, and Turkish fir pretty much exclusively in the Northwest for use for the plant growth regulators. There's been trials using the products on Fraser, Douglas-fir, and Korean fir, but what we found is that Fraser is very sensitive to this product, the ABA product, and probably we're going to have to do a lot more work before there's an operational use of this product on Fraser fir. Korean fir, on the other hand, is fairly insensitive to high rates of the ConShape. Douglas fir is one that it's been used on successfully, but it probably doesn't have as much of a fit because Douglas fir is pretty good at making tops on its own. So what we're trying to do with these PGR products is try to eliminate the need for cutting tops and the need for tying up branches that never decided to turn into a top. So the fit for this product is trying to eliminate the need, at least on some trees, for cutting the tops and then trying to get a natural leader forming without the use of ties and sticks and different ways of getting leaders to straighten up. So that's what the growth regulator is being used for, and I think that's going to be the use going forward and the fit for it going forward. The product is called ConShape, and here's a bad picture of the label. The label just came out a couple of weeks ago, and it's going to be distributed by Valent Bioscience through mycorrhizal applications in Cottage Grove. They're anticipating to have supply out at Wilbur-Ellis and Nutrien distributors. They still have not set a price, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it isn't prohibitively expensive. The active ingredient for this product is abscistic acid at 10%. And this was a product that was developed in part in Denmark by Steen Sorensen. And we've been trying to adapt the product for different species and different rates. It's a 10% active ingredient product. And we'll be going through some of the pieces of that label as we go through the talk. let's talk about how it's applied. The easiest way to apply it is with this easy roller applicator. Essentially, it's a tank, the blue part, with a pump, and it looks suspiciously like something you'd see in a Arby's restaurant that pumps ketchup. But and I think that it's kind of been adopted from some of those uses. And then there's a long tube that goes into a metal clasp, and at the end of that is some paint rollers. So the product, the Easy Roller is available from Drake's Crossing. They have about 20 or 30 of these things sitting on their shelves. And the funny story on that is, like, I'll digress a little bit, is about 20 years ago, I asked the distributor in Denmark to send me 20 rollers, or 40 rollers, something like that. And I got a note from an importer about a month later that my 2 pallets of rollers are here. And what I was hoping to get was just the rollers on the end of the paint rollers. And that's what I meant to order, but the distributor got very excited and thought I wanted the entire product. So when we had 2 pallets of these things that Jan was kind enough to take on being the distributor for this product, and still has a fair number of them, on the shelves at the nursery. So, and I've listed Jan's phone number at Drake's Crossing outside of Silverton on the screen. And so he still has a fair number of those to distribute. So essentially the way this works is the pump applies a thin stream of material onto the paint rollers on the top. So you pump the material up, and then you'll see a stream coming out about right here on the roller through little holes. And then you put the leader of the tree, in the middle of the roller and swipe upwards. So it takes a little practice to do it. It seems like it should be real simple, but it's often, you go up the tree and all of a sudden you're not paying attention, and you're off. You don't have the leader between the rollers anymore. So that's the way it works, and you get the paint roller saturated to the point where they're just about ready to drip, and then you start rolling trees with the opposing rollers, not squeezing the leader together, but just firmly making sure it's encompassing that leader when you swipe the upward. If you happen to think you didn't get any material on the tree, don't make a second swipe. We've learned the hard way that that's a no-no, and it's like doubling the rate on the leader, and you're likely to get some damage. There are other application options. What we at one time, Judy last year used a quart hand spray bottle. The difficulty with that is that it applies more material than the roller, and it takes more time. So what we found is that the Easy Roller was the fastest way to do it, but that's not to say that you can't use other types of devices to apply the product. So with the quart spray bottle, it was just one squirt down one side of the leader, and it applied about double of what the rollers put on, but it was effective. So the Easy Roller is not the only way to do it, but the Easy Roller is probably the easiest way to apply the material. So what are we looking for? What does success look like? Here's a leader that we've applied the material, the con shape on, and it's probably been reduced in size, probably 40%. But it reduces the length of the leader in not proportionally. In other words, there'll be more buds at the upper part of the leader down at the lower part. So when you apply the material, when the leader is at the length that you want it to be, it'll expand from that point upward. So a lot more buds are going to be concentrated towards the upper part of the leader than at the bottom part. The bottom part will be more of sort of a normal distribution. The other thing that's interesting to note is that this is a leader that's been applied. We've had the con shape applied 2 years in a row. So you can see that right in here, we've got more. We're starting to fill in the density of the tree in here, and we have a shortened leader up here. So this is what 2 years of application will begin to look like. So the typical applications for trees, would be, when the tree is getting to that size, where you're going to have to cut the leaders normally. So, you can let your trees, Nordman or Turkish or Noble run up till they're 4.5 to 5 feet. And then when at that point when the leaders are going to be starting to be excessively long, that's the point that you'd be using this material. You don't necessarily want to slow them down when they're younger, because they'll be filling in naturally as the tree moves higher. So at about 4.5 to 5 feet is sort of where I see the fit, and then applying it probably maybe 2-3 years after they've reached that height. Again, the same age where you'd be cutting those leaders if you were doing it that way. So that's what I feel the kind of the fit for this product is going to be. So we had the label approved in first week of March. The way it works is different than some of the other leader control or PGRs that we've used in the past. It works by slowing and stopping the leader from extending. So you wait until the leader is the height within 2 to 3 inches of the height you want it to be, and then you apply the material at that point. So there's less damage and less guesswork than you'd have with some of the naphthalene acetic acid sucker stopper products that we've been using in the past. Its use in the market prior to being used on Christmas trees has been on table grapes, trying to turn table grapes into that dark crimson color. And it's also used to keep baby vegetables small. So it has a number of kind of different uses in the agricultural world. And I'm not totally sure why it works, just that it does. Don't know what the price is. We hope it's going to be reasonable. Valent is still working on setting the price for this season. So that's what success will look like. So timing. In Oregon and Washington, and that's where the product's labeled right now, is in those 2 states. It's a national label, but it's been approved by the Department of Agriculture in both Oregon and Washington. You need to let the tree grow until it's within about 1 to 3 inches of the desired final height. So with Turkish fir and trials that we've done in the past, that time frame is probably around May to the middle of June. Noble fir is typically a week later. And it's like any treatment in Christmas trees. It's kind of a numbers game, and each tree is going to respond a little bit differently. It's not going to be cookie cutter approach that's going to work the same on all trees. There's still going to be trees that are going to be too long, and there'll be trees that you'll make the application on, you'll make them maybe shorter than you wanted. So don't get the feeling that every tree is going to be perfect. Never seems to work that way. In fact, remember a great quote from Dan Green about noble fir. He said that noble fir does exactly what he wanted it to do about 50% of the time. So, but that's going to be the time frame through most of Oregon and probably up into Washington for when you're going to be doing the applications. So this is just a table right off the label. So we'll talk a little bit more about mixing and rates for mixing. We feel pretty confident that if you stay at about the 200 up to 300 rate, and that would be the 20,000 to 30,000 parts per million rate, you'll be successful. So for those that are doing this for the first time, probably a successful first time would be to use 200 mils of the product mixed with 800 mils of water, and you've got 22 ounces, 22.4 ounces of product and 105 ounces doing it in the gallons system. So that's kind of the rate. What we found is that noble fir probably can stand a little higher rate than Nordman or Turkish. So you could go up to 300 or 30,000 parts per million. I would not go up to 400 until you've gotten a couple years worth of experience about this product at your site. So if you're doing it for the first time, I would just stick at that 20,000 parts per million to be safe. I think that'll have little damage and be a safe one to stay at for that first year. So to summarize, the rate of the con shape is going to be somewhere between 200 to 300 mils of product, depending on the site and the species. Don't use any surfactant. In treating trees that are probably within 4 to 6 feet tall, in the last 2 years, we found that a liter of mix will treat somewhere around 1,200 to 1,400 trees. And you'll be averaging somewhere around 6 trees per minute if your field is kind of the typical spacing and the typical size. So the thing to keep in mind, though, is that there's only going to be maybe 25 to 30% of the trees that are going to be at that perfect treatment length at the time you go out to do it. So you have a couple of options. One is to just make one pass and do the treatment on those trees that happen to be at that proper length at that time that you're going to be doing it. The other is to make 2 passes, in your fields, maybe 2 weeks apart or far enough apart that you've got the trees that weren't treated the first time that have reached the size that you want to be treating those liters. So that would mean coming back to the same field twice. So it's kind of, your call as a grower about what you want to do. What we found is that you can, and we'll talk about this a little more in some coming slides, is you can treat the same trees with another application as long as there are probably been about 2-week intervals between treatments. We didn't see any damage with 2 weeks going in between treatments. But at much shorter than that, we don't have much data to say, it's no problem if you treat the same liters twice. So that brings up the issue of trying to figure out which trees you already treated. And all trees seem to look the same. So growers have come up with some clever ways of marking trees that have been treated. And this slows your operation down. But some growers have used bread tags to put on the, little bread tabs that come on bread loaves, to show that that tree's been treated. You can also put a dye in the material, as long as you want everything that dye color that you're treating, that you're using the sucker stopper or the con shape on. And other folks have done things like paint the ground or use ribbon to indicate which trees have been treated. So, but that's going to slow you down if either with most of those, except mixing the dye in with the treatment. And the dye will last for at least most of the season. So that's probably the easiest way to mark the trees. You do see damage. We were doing some higher rates than we're suggesting that you use. So most of the trees will have very little damage. It'll be 0 and 1s. You might get, at the rates we're talking, a few trees that are damage level 2, which is these sort of intermediate damage picture here, where you've got some red needles on a little streak up and down one side or the other of the leader. And it's hard to know how much of that's caused by squeezing too hard versus the product itself. At the rates that we're talking, the 200 to 300 rates, we saw very little of this 3 and 4 types of damage, where you've got a leader that's going a little bit crooked and you've killed off some needles in here, but you still have intact and live buds on the top. At a damage level 4, you've killed, or we killed, the top leader, and buds are dead all the way to about halfway down the leader. But it's not a systemic product, so you don't kill the whole top of the tree. You'll damage most of the leader, but again, it's not systemic, so you're not going to see damage moving down the tree. So a couple of slides just summarizing some of the points about using the con shape. Double rolling on the same day, don't do it. We had average damage levels at even the low rates of up to 2, which, that's just an average rate. So we had damages in a lot of damages 3s and an occasional 4. So it's just not something you want to do. You can double roll 20 days apart. We know you can do that. We don't know what the interval, what the safe interval is. We haven't done enough trials with doing that. So we talked a little bit about marking trees and organizing repeat treatments. So you don't have a lot of time to waste with doing these kinds of applications. So, if the tree's too far along, you can't back up the clock. So you got to be really watching the trees at your farm to know when to be out there to do this. So you've only got, at most probably 3 to 4 weeks to be doing this kind of application. And I certainly would not send my less experienced people out to do this. There's a lot of judgment in knowing what trees to treat and how to treat properly. So I would use some of your more experienced people or do it yourself on the first applications before you get a handle on how it should work. So that's my summary of the con shape. And one last slide, just to give you a sense of some upcoming research that's just getting started on needle midge. And, many of we're going to be looking for some replacement products for chlorpyrifos for lorsban as the product is phased out or banned altogether. So Holiday Tree Farm and some others are looking at testing some products. Success from Corteva is one of those, and there's a couple others that hopefully we can get some trials going to see if there's a good replacement for Lorsban or chlorpyrifos. Another project that's just getting underway, and that's trying to find some useful parasites that can be used to control needle midge. And this is just a project that's just getting started. Dave Shaw at OSU, our forest health specialist, is kind of leading this project. Dave Saline is involved. Betty and Pat Malone are thankfully going to be involved with all their background on looking for products or parasites, ODA, ODF, and there's a lady from Turkey that's working on her master's, Salila Boyvat, if I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but those are the kind of the team that's going to be working on the looking at some of these parasitoids. So that's to come. So that's my talk for tonight. If there's time, I'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chal. And yeah, I would open it up for questions. If you like, type your questions in chat, and it's okay also if you want to speak up this time, but just make sure it's one at a time. But let's just see if anybody's got any questions about it. I guess while we're waiting to see if anyone comes up with anything, that last slide when you're talking about the startup for people who haven't done this before, that seems like that's a crucial time, is your first time. And maybe just advice on how to get started and do it right the first time, or whether maybe you or Judy are available to offer more guidance for people that are starting up.
Yeah, and feel free to call if there's any questions about this. Call Judy or I. Gustavo, you have a question about what was the product name and company. It's called Conshape, and the company, it's a Valent Bioscience product. The company that's going to be distributing it is a subsidiary company called Mycorrhizal Applications out of Grants Pass. That's where the distributor for the products going to be, but they're telling me that it'll be in Wilbur-Ellis and Nutrien stores. So fingers crossed.
All right. Any other questions for Chal at this time? All right, looks like Robert has a question. Sounds like the PGRs reduce the internodal length near the leader tip rather than by killing buds. Do you think these extra buds could become a problem later if the tree is not harvested?
I think the PGRs reduce that internode length. So that internode, let's say the internode was going to be 18 inches long, with X number of buds along that 18 inches. There's still going to be that. Our impression is that there's still that same number of buds, but it's going to be in a shorter, compact leader. And what I was trying to say is the buds are more concentrated at the tip or the upper third of the leader, because that's where the majority of the shortening occurred. And I think that's the advantage of having, you have all these, you have not extra branches, but you have higher density of branches in that leader length. And so you got to plan for it in your harvest system. So what I found on our farm in using this is that you could probably let the leaders run a little longer and they fill in better because you've got a higher density of buds along the leader. So we're thinking, we might be able to cut down, a year off of harvest length or harvest interval. So we're hoping. There's never a problem with extra buds, I don't think.
There you go. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe we'll just transition now. Chal, if you want to stop sharing, and we'll turn it over to Gary, and we'll have more time for Q&A at the end. And if things keep coming up, we can hang around even longer after 7:30, which is our scheduled end time. But thanks again, Chal. And of course, Chal will be here, and it's Gary's turn. So if you would like to go ahead and share your screen, Gary, and we'll get started with your show.
So thanks, Ben. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to just give a brief overview of some research that we're doing. Unlike Chal's, it's not going to be ready for application. So it's more a heads up on sort of what we're doing. So as Chal indicated, I'll talk about some Megastigmus infested seed work, Douglas-fir twig weevil, the seed storage project, and I'm just going to briefly mention a Phytophthora project on Trojan fir. And a lot of this work is, there's a lot of collaborators involved, industry partners, and then funding sources that make it all possible. And I wanted to thank or acknowledge Thomas Whitney. He was a postdoc in our program for about 1.5 years, entomologist by training. So it was really great to have him. He was really interested in working with growers. And I think those of you who he had an opportunity to interact with probably got that sense from him. And he recently, at the end of December, accepted a job as the regional entomologist for Davy Tree Company, which is a company that does tree maintenance in landscape settings. So we're going to miss Thomas, but he's still going to be involved a little bit in the twig weevil project until we wrap that up. So the first project I'll talk about is Metastigmas. It's a wasp actually that lays its eggs on cones, and those eggs hatch, and then they infest the seed. And the presence of the larvae of this insect in the seed, if it's detected when it's brought into the U.S., the seed has to be destroyed because there's no acceptable treatment that can be applied. So this has potentially a lot of implications as we're doing more work with and trying to grow more Nordman and Turkish fir and maybe Trojan fir. There are a number of different species of this insect. I think there's 30 some, of which there's about 15 that are considered to be regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, APHIS. But when they are doing their screening of seed that's coming in, they use X-ray machines to look at a subset, a very small sample of seed. If they find any indication of larvae in the seed, they cut the seed open and see whether the larvae is alive. They don't necessarily try to identify which Metastigmus species it might be. If they find larvae, the seed lot is rejected, and by their only options are the importer can ship it back to the exporter, or the importer can have the seed destroyed. So this shows a picture of here on the left of an X-ray of seeds with larvae. This is a very high, I would say, staged picture because when we're doing this and stuff, we might be lucky to find 3 seeds out of 100 that have Metastigmus larvae in them. We need a lot of infested seed to do our research, and one of the challenges has been in getting infested seed. So we've been having seed processors, people who are processing cones and stuff, saving us the trash seed, which is most likely to have larvae in it and stuff for this work. On the right's a picture that shows seed cut open, and you can see the larvae there in that seed. So what we're looking at is the potential of a post-entry seed heat treatment. Heat treatments have been shown to be effective in controlling this pest on Douglas-fir seed. You can see it's a pretty warm temperature, 45 degrees centigrade. Let me kind of do a cheat sheet here. I'm looking at that's about maybe 112 degrees Fahrenheit. For 27 to 33 hours. It was effective in killing the larvae, and on studies that were done on the viability of the seed, they didn't see any effect on germination or growth of the seed after this treatment. So we've been looking at this as a potential on these imported seeds. So we're looking at the threshold temperature time required to kill the larvae, and what effect the heat treatments have on the viability, germination, and growth of Northern and Turkish fir. And as I said, we've been getting trash seed, and we actually had to stop work on this project for a while because we didn't have enough seed to run the trials. And so we've been resupplied with seed, and work on this project is resuming. So seed dissection is used to determine treatment effectiveness. I wish we had a X-ray machine. Those are fairly costly. New digital X-ray machines are about $90,000 a piece and stuff. So we rely on dissecting the seed and cutting the seed open and looking for the larvae, determining whether it's alive. So it's white. If you touch it, it'll flex a little bit. Dead larvae turn dark color, and obviously are not going to move if you touch them briefly. So the preliminary data we have is that you can see that on the left there's we had controls. We had 35 degrees centigrade for 24, 48 hours. 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, and 45 for 24, 48 hours. That was, we had no viable larvae. And so there was a difference between 44 at 24 hours and 45 at 24. And that there was still some detection of live larvae at 44. So you can see, obviously, one of the things that would be super critical if you were doing this type of stuff from an operational standpoint is you would have to have very precise temperature monitoring equipment and being able to monitor your temperatures and maintain the correct temperatures. So what our current work is going to focus on is determining the dose response curve at 45 degrees centigrade, and looking at whether 4, 8, 12, 16, 24, 24 hours is sufficient to, and by doing this, we'll identify the optimum treatment duration. And then we'll determine the effect of that optimal treatment duration on the viability and growth of the seeds. So the second project that Thomas was involved with is the management of Douglas-fir twig weevil. This is a pest that's native to this area. It's not something that is new and has been introduced. The reason that we're doing work on it is because this is a pest that if it's found on exported trees, and some countries will not accept those trees. So there's a zero tolerance for this pest on exported trees. Historically, this pest has primarily been an issue on Douglas-fir, especially on dry sites where the trees are under stress. The weevils attack those trees. But in the past few years, this pest has also been found on a number of true firs, such as noble and Nordman fir. And as I said, Mexico, for example, has a zero tolerance, and a number of loads have been rejected because the inspectors have found evidence of this pest on exported trees. So the goal in this project is to understand a little more about the biology and the development of this pest on Christmas trees in Oregon and Washington, develop a degree day model potentially for symptom development, and also more importantly, when the adults are emerging from the tree, because this will help us get a better understanding of when controls should be applied to target the adults before they start laying eggs on the trees. And then we're also doing some work to evaluate pesticide efficacy. So this shows a series of Douglas-fir, noble-fir, Nordman-fir trees that have flagged branches. Not all trees that have flagged branches on them have Douglas-fir twig weevil. It's not a symptom that's unique to this pest, although I'll show you some things on how you can determine whether the symptoms are being caused by this pest. On the left is a picture that Thomas took of an emerging weevil coming out of a hole. You can see the exit hole. The larvae are developing in the twigs. They pupate in the twig, and then the weevil emerges out of this exit hole. It's sort of like taking a pencil and sticking a hole, the lead into the stem and creating a small hole, or taking a 16th inch diameter drill and drilling a small hole. They're very circular little holes. They're fairly diagnostic for this. If you cut open the twigs that are flagging and stuff, you'll sometimes be able to see the larvae. Sometimes there's just a gallery, you don't find the larvae, but if you have twig weevil and you cut enough of them, you'll find this larvae in there. And the larvae are in there basically from the early fall until the adults are going to be emerging in the springtime. And so just more pictures. You'll see the pupal cases on the right where the larvae are beginning to pupate and stuff prior to emergence. And again, the picture that I showed previously. So you can see along there, there's a stem that has pupae in it. It has a pupal chamber, and it has an closing adult that hasn't emerged yet. So the key is to look for these exit holes. They're indicative that the flagging and damage to the tree was caused by a twig weevil. So we've been working on this degree day model, and in doing that, we have a couple of sites. We've had some sites. Judy's helped some on this project, and Chal's helped on this project. The bulk of the sampling and stuff is being done at a fairly large site in Washington, and we're also monitoring it. Have been monitoring it in a forest stand of young Douglas-fir that are emerging in a forest stand. So in 2020, the initial flagging showed up in mid-March, mid to late March, and the main period of symptom development was from early May through early June. Adult emergence range from the 25th of June through August 17th, and mid-July was the peak period. Now, when these adult insects come out, they don't immediately mate and start laying eggs. They're active for about 3 to 4 weeks, something like that, before they start laying eggs. And so it may be possible that, the degree day model will develop would take that into account, and hopefully be able to control the pest maybe with a single application, particularly if there's any residual activity from the insecticide. Thomas developed this little sort of drinking cup test where he puts some wet plaster down on the bottom. You can cut a twig. When he was here in his office, he would commonly have twigs in there with weevils, and he'd be watching them mating, laying eggs, and emerging and stuff. And then a little mesh area at the top to provide some ventilation. And so what we've been doing to evaluate effectiveness of insecticides, it would be really difficult to do this under field conditions. So we're treating trees, and then we harvest the small twig off of the tree, bring it in, put it in the cup, and then expose the twig weevils to the twig. And so right now we've been evaluating 4 insecticides this last year. Asana, Brigade, Lorsban, and Orthene. And all of the products were applied at label rates. And one of the things that we were interested in is how fast of a knockdown was. In other words, if there was direct exposure to the of the twig weevil to the insecticide application. So we would treat and then evaluate the effect of the treatment on the weevil itself. And you can see that the hours after exposure, the Asana and Brigade were extremely effective, whereas the Lorsban, there was a delay in activity for at least about 24 hours. The Orthene did not work at all, was no different than the control. So the Asana and Brigade gave almost immediate knockdown, and the Lorsban was a little more delayed, a little slower acting. So in another test, we looked at treating twigs 2, 7, or 14 days before the weevils were exposed to those twigs to kind of look at what the residual activity was. And again, in this trial, what we see is consistently is that the Asana and Brigade, even if it was applied 14 days prior to exposure of the weevil to the twigs, was very effective in killing the weevil upon exposure. The Orthene did not work. The Lorsban was also effective in this test, that you even at 2 days, 7 or 14 days. So Asana Brigade performed much better than the controls. They at all residual ages, no perceived recovery of untreated replacement on when the weevils were moved to untreated twigs. There was no recovery, and the Brigade had 100% knockdown across the board. Orthene doesn't appear to be an effective material that would be used even when it's applied directly to the twig weevils. So in this coming year, we're going to be completing the degree day work. We're going to continue the pesticide efficacy work, and then Holiday Tree Farm is going to help us do a field trial looking at Asana and Brigade aerial versus ground application. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to treat the trees, but then we're going to harvest branches off, and we have to have a large number of twig weevils to be able to infest these branches and determine efficacy. So we've got a lot of work planned on this project for August this coming summer. We have this new project which involves the viability and vigor of Nordman, Turkish, and Trojan fir seed. I mentioned that there's quite a bit of interest in importing, and there is a fair amount of seed of these species currently being imported from Georgia, Russia, and Turkey. In addition to the Metastigmas issue, there's an issue that historically nurseries have quite a bit of problems in storing this seed and having it, the germination be maintained. In fact, a number of nurseries say that if they don't use the seed the first year, it's very difficult for them to use it after that because of low germination. So in this project, we're going to determine the optimal moisture content and storage temperature for sustaining the viability of and seed vigor. And this is based on some work has been done in Denmark, looking at seed moisture contents and storage temperatures. So this is a very busy slide, but basically what we're doing is we're at the point where we've almost got all the seed. We have some domestic sources as well as imported sources that we're looking at. We're going to dry them down to different moisture levels, and then they're going to be stored at either -18 or -10. A lot of nurseries currently store at about -10, whereas the Danish work would suggest that -18 would be a lot better. Then we're going to be taking samples out of this seed right after drying it down before it goes into cold storage, and then at various times after it's in cold storage. Those samples will all be sent to OSU Seed Laboratory, and seed testing will be done so that we can determine the effectiveness of these treatments in improving seed vigor. The last thing I'll talk about, I just have, I think, 2 or 3 slides, is Phytophthora root rots. Phytophthora is a major issue, particularly when you try and grow species such as noble or Fraser fir. Those 2 species are extremely sensitive, susceptible to Phytophoras. Phytophoras are known as water molds. They occur in areas where there's poor drainage, saturated soils. That's because they have swimming spores that swim in that water and move from one tree to the next. It can get into nurseries, such as seen in the upper left, and cause significant issues. The work we've done in the past has shown that Nordman fir on the upper right-hand corner, you'll see 2 rows of live Nordman fir straddling a row of dead noble fir. So Nordman fir is very tolerant to Phytophthora. In fact, we recommend planting Nordman fir, Turkish fir in sites where noble fir can't be grown because of Phytophthora. What we do is we flood these. We sort of make rice paddies, big rice paddies. We infest the soil with the Phytophthora. We put the plants in there and then create the situations necessary for infection by flooding. And the picture on the bottom right shows the dead trees. The trees that are dying in there are all mostly noble fir, some Fraser fir. And most of the other trees are all Turkish fir that, again, the Turkish fir and Nordman fir appear to be quite resistant. There's a lot of interest in through the conifer project, and because of that project showing that Trojan fir have the potential to produce high quality Christmas trees, particularly here in the Pacific Northwest. So we have a project that's funded by the Christmas Tree Promotion Board to confirm whether or not Trojan fir has similar levels of resistance to Phytophthora that we see in Nordman, in Turkish fir. Those trials will all be done with 12 families of Trojan fir that Chal was able to obtain this year. And we have that seed, and we'll just be starting to grow that seed up so that we have plants for testing next year. And those tests will be done under a cool and warm greenhouse environment, because the temperature at which the soil is at has a big effect on the severity of the symptoms and the susceptibility of some conifer species. So with that, if there's some questions or if there's time, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
All right, thank you, Gary. Yeah, we have time for questions. Actually, there was one in the chat a while back. Tom Norby was asking, in general, research is spending a lot of time and money on Nordman and Turkish fir, and what percentage of the market do these species currently make up? Where do you think that's going to grow to? And then B, why not more research on domestic trees like noble fir, making it more viable in the long run?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. Although we're focusing a lot on these sort of exotics, if you will. They do have a number of advantages, potentially. There's less susceptible to a number of limiting disease problems that we have and stuff. They have very good high quality and things like that. But that doesn't mean we're also not working on maintaining and continuing to do some work on these other, on noble fir, Douglas-fir, and things like that. But I don't know, Chal may have some perception, but my sense is that you see a lot more Nordman fir in the marketplace now. When I do retail lot surveys, particularly in the West, I see Nordman fir being marketed as Nordman fir and stuff, and you see more of that. I don't know what the percentage is, whether it's 10, 15% at this point in time, but it's a slow process to change the percentage of a tree as far as the composition of what's being produced.
Yeah, Chal, do you have anything to add on that market share for the marketability of those?
Well, I think Nordman and Turkish, are moved into our third most common, probably replacing Grand fir. It's got a long ways to go before it bumps noble or Doug fir, out of its place. And part of, I think, the reasoning, Tom, is that there's a lot of unknowns on some of these new species that we're looking at. I don't know that we've excluded from looking at research noble and Doug. Certainly, we've been working a lot on creating new seed orchards for noble and Doug fir. So something, but yeah, interesting question.
Okay, here's another question. Robert says he's just curious about the species of Phytophthora. Which ones are most troublesome to noble fir? You had mentioned there were several different species.
Yeah, so a recent graduate student that I had, Katie McKeever, she actually did a survey of plantings across the U.S. And collected Phytophthras in Christmas tree plantings across the U.S. And it varies tremendously across the U.S. So, example, most of the Phytophthora that you see on Fraser fir in North Carolina is Phytophthora cinnamomi. We rarely see Phytophthora cinnamomi out here. It requires much higher soil temperatures than typically we have. So we would see Phytophthora cactorum, Phytophthora cambivora. So there's some other species that we see. So that's why it's important to test different species of Phytophthora. And because some are a little more aggressive than others, and you wouldn't want to just limit it to a few species. In relation to the other question, I would also make the comment that one of, I think, the challenges that the Christmas tree industry has is providing diversity of choices, if you will, for customers and stuff. And by identifying other species of trees in addition to what we currently are growing and growing very well, it does provide some opportunity to have a more diverse mix of species and types of trees that potentially customers might be interested in purchasing.
All right. Any other questions for Gary at this point? Gary, actually, back looking at the insecticide treatments for the twig weevil, the two that were most effective, what's the kind of toxicity or the non-target concerns for those particular products?
To be honest, Glenn, I'm not certain. I'm not as I'm not as up to things on the insecticides as I am on fungicides per se. I'd have to look that up, but I don't know whether Chal knows. I think they have a 12-hour re-entry period on them. So
Yeah, I mean, the reentry for Lord's now is what, 4 days, so that's been increased. And something like Brigade's going to be a broad spectrum insecticide, so using it, you run the risk of spider mite coming in after your application. So there's concerns on all of these.
Okay. And then there was a follow-up, just an anecdotal observation that my family's farm has noted greater drought tolerance of Turkish fir. I don't know if that's something that anyone else has observed or any comments on that.
That's one of the advantages of these species. They clearly can tolerate drier conditions. I do some things with some of the growers in California, in the Sierra Nevadas, in Placerville area, and a number of those growers have shifted over to Nordman fir because they're much more tolerant to the dry conditions. They don't have to irrigate them as much, and they do a lot better.
Yeah. Okay.
May not think they're growing on the tops, but the roots are growing fast. So they do well in drought.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that seems to be increasingly important in the Willamette Valley for certain. I'm not sure how it is up in Washington. Okay, well, if there are no more questions for Gary at this stage, go ahead and stop sharing, and thank you, Gary. And then we'll move on to Judy.
It is nice to be here. I'm always last, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but I am here. So here we go. You all know the name of the thing you're at tonight, so thanks for sticking with it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Christmas tree website that we have and what types of resources you will find on that. One of the main resources you're going to find on it is the Pacific Northwest Pest Management Handbooks. They're a really valuable resource, and I think that they're not utilized, and Chal and I were discussing this, they're not utilized nearly enough. So I will go over the 3 books that are on the website. There's a weed, insect, and a plant disease management handbook, and those are really good. Then I'm going to move on to some various publications that we also have on the website. There's OSU Extension Catalog, which has numerous Christmas tree specific publications, as well as a whole catalog of other nice publications. But I'm going to focus on the Christmas tree, of course. And then, so I think that I will go straight to my website. Okay, so the website is relatively new. OSU went through a big change of websites. It's probably already been 3-4 years ago, and it's been kind of a growing site ever since. But if you have any old sites bookmarked, you might want to unbookmark those and bookmark this website here. And I had it on the slides, and we'll have it at the end for you as well. But when you come to the North Willamette Research Extension Center website, there'll be programs. You click on the Christmas tree, and this is what you will see. So on this main page, I've just got, I list the pest management handbooks, but I've also got links to other things. I'm developing a Christmas tree seed orchard page. It is not quite done, and it will be there. So this is a definite work in progress. I've also, this used to say events, but since events have been kind of in short supply and they've all become virtual, now it's more like updates. And so we just had a Pacific Northwest Christmas Tree Association short course webinar. And so if there are events coming up, I try and list them here. So here's where you would find the video for that. Also, here's the event tonight and some recent news about Chal retiring. So those are just updates on the main page. But as we get down, my contact information, Chal's contact information, because he is still working, even though he's retired, he's working half-time. And so Grower's Resource is the page I'm going to go to next. And you can go directly to that easily, but if you get to the Christmas tree page, you'll find the Grower's Research page or resource page, not research yet. But here again, I have listed the 3 Pacific Northwest management handbooks. And those are what I really want to emphasize tonight. So I'm going to go in and look at the weed management. So these are big handbooks. They're 300 to 400 pages, and they're updated yearly by experts in the field. So you can see that Chal and Ed Peachy, who's a weed expert, have updated this one. And they're all set up similarly, but I have linked directly to the Christmas tree section in this. As you can see over to the right, there's other topics over here. I mean, you could find any major crop that's grown in the Pacific Northwest, and that includes Washington, Idaho, Oregon. They're set up and they give a general kind of introduction here. They talk about weeds and how to manage weedy vegetation, some general information here. And as you get down to the bottom, you know, they give you some general guidelines, just like a label would. But at the bottom, this one is set up mainly 3 different areas. You've got new plantings, and then you have 2 for established plantings, one with winter applications, one with broadcast or directed applications. I think I'll take you into the established plantings. So you click on that, and these are set up alphabetically. So they'll have the chemical name here alphabetically. And if there's a trade name like Casseron, it'll be in parentheses following that. So because these are updated every year, you're getting the most up-to-date information about that pesticide right here. It'll give you the rate, the timing, any remarks. It talks about the mode of action, the group that it's in, which is important, so you can keep your rotation up if you are doing that, which we advise you should. But again, so these aren't in order of like the best or what to use first. They're alphabetical, so keep that in mind. But there's a lot of information here. So you can look at that and see what to use and when, if you're doing the winter applications. Going back, you could look at new plantings, what you could apply safely, and recommendations here. Same type, mode of action, rates, chemical family, all that. So that is a really good resource. I'm going to go back up here. You can download this right here, or I'm going to move my view of all you so I can see it. You can download the whole section right here on this button here. And it sounds like a lot, but I think this weed section's 8 pages. So if you wanted to download that and put it on your desktop or in a file on your computer, then you'd have it, you know, where you can find it quickly rather than going to the website. Or you can look at it here too. It's easy to find. There's also some printable posters that you can open up, download those and print them. This one is on herbicide effectiveness on weeds and Christmas trees, and it has the weeds on the left, chemicals across the top, and the categories that above that. And so this is really useful. There's 2 pages to it. This one is hard to read for me from here. Same setup though. Herbicides, looks like soil persistent herbicides, and then down here are the actual weeds. So those are a couple other nice resources you could get off of this. Okay, so back to the website. That was the weed management handbook. Here's the insect management handbook. I'm going to go into that briefly. Again, it links directly to the Christmas tree plantation pests, and it gives you some general notes right here. But this one is arranged by pest. And so the first group is like pests that are common on most Christmas tree species, conifer aphids, things like that. Down below, we've got specific to more to Douglas-fir, although we know that the Douglas-fir twig weevil has been found elsewhere. Then there was a category for export pests, and then some other species like if you're growing pine, spruce, and other true firs. So I'll just take you into, let's go back to aphids, since those are a problem. On any of these pests, you click on it, there'll be some nice pictures over here to help you with some identification. There'll be categories, the pest description, crop damage, cultural controls, chemical management controls, and if there's biologicals available, those will be listed too. Again, you can print this off if you just want to print the information about that. You can download this entire section, but I think this one's a pretty big section. I was looking at it earlier today, and I think it was over 100 pages, so it might be better to not do that. Again, you can look at any of these and they'll be set up similarly. Let's look at something that is exports to Mexico. Again, it gives you the management control. Looks like they're talking about different chemicals that you would treat and when. So this will have up-to-date information for you, but you'll still need to read the label. But any publications that I'm going to show you won't have any up-to-date pest or pesticide information. They keep it to these handbooks for a reason, because they update these, and the publications aren't updated quite as often. The last handbook I wanted to look at was the plant disease management handbook, and it is set up differently. Let me go back for a sec. It says right here below it that when you click on it, like I just did, you'll need to enter fir into the search. So I'll show you. Right here, the quick find, you'll need to enter fir, and I'm not sure why this comes up, but it doesn't hinder what we're doing. You just get rid of it. Apply, and it will take you to about 3 pages of Christmas tree diseases and or disorders. And so there's a lot of Douglas-fir on the first page. Then you go to the true firs. So I'll just click on, let's look at interior needle blight. So again, they're set up pictures so to help you ID causes, symptoms, cultural controls, chemical controls, things like that. Let's look at one other one. Let's see, let's do the Phytophthora, since Gary was talking about that. So again, pictures, maybe not as good as some of Gary's. Causes, possible other click-ons you could do to see some other examples of like shoot blights that are related. Symptoms, sampling, cultural controls. So all the information you need to know is basically here. So these are super great resources, and if you haven't ever looked at them, you should come to the website and do some searching around and just play with them. Again, they're on the resources page, and they're also on the main page as well. So with that, I think I've mentioned everything I wanted to mention about those. Just make sure you look at them. These used to be in print only, and they were really thick, and every year they'd come out, and it was just like, what do I do with the old one? So it's nice that it's all online now, and you can look at it and download what you need and print out what you need. And so that's a great thing. Under publications, let's see, I don't know what time how we're doing. I'm going to look at just a few of them. I'm going to take you to the OSU catalog. Well, actually, first I'll show you the rest of the page. So I've got some industry resources here, some publications, some pesticide safety, pest, pollinator and IPM sites, labs, and just some other miscellaneous resources, including some other schools, other colleges and universities that have some nice information on their sites as well. A lot of different links, but I'll take you into the publications, and it's the first link under publications. It's the extension catalog, and it links right to the Christmas tree section. There's lots of publications in this whole catalog, and they're all over here, and you can get to them that way as well. But I have it linked just to the Christmas tree section. Within the Christmas tree section, it shows all the different ones that are tagged for Christmas trees. They're all really good. I'll take you into the nutrient management guide. This is a really kind of a staple publication that's been around, and it's been revised recently. 62 pages. You can download it. You don't have to buy these anymore. I think that they used to be, a lot of them were free, but I think that they were a small charge for some of them. So you can download it right here. Just click that. You can save it to your computer or print it out. But again, the 62 pages, I don't know if you would really want to print it out, but you get into this one. There's a nice table of contents. That's kind of jumping around, but it goes over lots of topics: site preparation, seedling establishment, rotations, post-harvest, methods of nutrient application, on and on. I was going to take you down to page, let's see, page 26 here, and show you just an example of some of the information you can find in here. Let's see. Let's see. I'm going to move that over there. My controls are blocking what I'm seeing here. So I think that I'm not finding. I went to, how to take a not a soil sample, a foliar sample. And I think I can't find it now. At any rate, there's information on all the different nutrients and the chemicals. Here we go. So this is what I wanted to show you. So this is a really useful bit of this publication, and it's talking about how to do foliar samples so you can see, what nutrients are in your trees. So just as an example, it tells you how to take the sample, how to, what part of the tree to take it from. I've referred several people to this publication just for this part. And the best part is it tells you, how to collect the sample, where to collect it, what analysis or tests to ask for, how to sample different fields, and then once you get your test results back, or how to interpret it. And so that's really helpful here. And so if you were going to utilize this part of this publication, probably want to do it fairly quick. I think that time's running out for time of year to do it. But once you get it back, Chal has this nice table over here that talks about the different species and what the target amounts of each nutrient would be in there. So you can really use just this part and really use this publication for lots of things, but that's just one helpful little part of this one. I wanted to take you back out and look at another one. So again, you can download it here. You can look at the other ones. Another one that I really like is this identifying and managing Christmas tree diseases, pests, and other problems. Chal and Louisa Santa Maria, who is also at the North Willamette, collaborated on this, and it's a really great publication. It has lots of different information in Spanish and English, which is very nice. So you can get it lots of different ways. You can view it now, which I'll take you in there. You can actually purchase it for $33, and it comes in a nice little flip book. It's plastic and it's smaller, and it flips, and one side is Spanish and one side is English. So you can also, this is really neat, download it into your cell phone and have it out in the field on your phone. And this is about the size of it when you buy it, when you have the physical book. This is what it looks like. These are what the pages look like. And I'll just kind of take you inside. They have color-coded it. Diseases are blue. Insects have purple headers. Other damages have green, and disorders have brown. And so like here's Anosis root rot, has a blue header. They take you into signs, symptoms, where to look, things that you might confuse it with, like Phytophthora or other root rots. And then this is really, really helpful. Each one of these has a calendar in it, a management calendar. And it tells you what time of year you might be seeing symptoms, when to manage. It's all color coded. So like this manage one from March to looks like middle of July is removing stumps. And then you go over here, monitoring, looks like most of November. And then right here, manage 2 is treating the stumps at harvest. And that's from this October to middle of December. So that is really helpful. Talks about scouting, management options, host susceptibility. So, I mean, this is a really awesome publication. And I'm sure a lot of you out there either have it or want it now, but there's all types of different, let's find an insect. Here we go. Let's do the twig aphid because we see those all the time. Yeah, it tells you the same thing. It's the purple, so you know it's insects. Gives you some good detailed pictures if you have never seen them. Signs and symptoms, where to look. Similar symptoms as some other aphids. Anyway, it gives you the calendar, when to monitor, symptoms again, management timing, scouting, management options. And again, this would probably refer you back for any, chemical treatments back. You could look it up in the handbooks. So that's a good thing to have with that. At any rate, so that is the downloaded, the mobile friendly that you could have on your phone. You can also just view it, and it looks like this. So it's got all the categories here again. And also you could go through a drop down. So you could just go straight to diseases and click on whatever you wanted, or insects rather than the picture. Either way, it works the same way. So just to show you, it kind of looks similar. It shows you the conifer aphid and then signs and symptoms. So same information, different format. And here you could switch it over to Spanish if you needed it for that in that form. And you can go to all the aphids over here on this side menu as well. So let me get back to the main. So we're back on the extension catalog. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I encourage you to log in or get on the website and click on the publications link. And it is this one right here, OSU Extension Catalog, Christmas trees. There's other publications that aren't listed in that you, I'm sure, would find very helpful. There's one on establishing and producing Douglas-fir Christmas trees in Western Oregon. And this has a lot of economics in it, as well as cultural and growing information. Also, if you go back, there's one for the same for noble fir. Moving on, those are actual publications. Here is a seed source and seedling source sheet that Chal and I put together last winter already. And this is just kind of an all-inclusive, you know, we've just kind of put it all in one spot. So you could look for seedlings, here's all the contacts we could come up with. There could be more out there. You can always send them to me. You don't see it on here, I can add it. You can probably find these sources kind of scattered, but we thought it would be nice to have them all in one spot. Also, seed sources are on here too. So if you're looking for seedlings this time of year and you're a member of the Pacific Northwest Christmas Tree Growers Association, they may still have a few left. And I'll take you to their site. That's another very good one. And then I'll check my time. How am I doing, Glenn?
Well, we're about 10 minutes over, but folks are hanging around.
Really?
But it's
Okay. This is my last. This will be my
time to
last.
wrap up.
If you haven't already been to the Pacific Northwest Christmas Tree Association's website, this is it, and it's linked at the top there. They have lots of information on events, webinars. They used to have more events listed as well, but here's all their past webinars. You can click here. They have a nice newsletter for members, and they've gone virtual too. And this is a great newsletter that's got all types of resources here, webinar recordings, other things, just general news. So if you aren't already a member, let's see, how do I get back? Oh, I went too far back. You should be a member of the association. That would be great. And there's information on how to join right here. So with that, I would just say there's no way I would go through all of these at any rate, but check out, there's some information from OSU about pesticide training. Those are really good. The IPM Center has a ton of information. Here's some pollinator, very good information there, and analytical labs. This is a great resource, as well as this one. So you could spend a lot of time here. And I think that it would be a good thing to just on a rainy day, take some time and look through it. Okay, so I think I've wrapped it up since we're already 10 minutes over. But again, I would just say bookmark our Christmas tree page right here. And that's where you're going to get all of those resources and more. And you could spend a lot of time on just many of those that I didn't even touch on. So thank you for your time, and I hope you're all still with us.
Yeah, they are. And you might go to that last slide just for some of the local interest in the.
There we go.
Yeah, we wanted to make a pitch for this, what just started today, actually, same time as tonight. Journey down the Clackamas Conference by the Clackamas River Basin Council, for those of you interested in the watershed stories. And they're starting a more than a year-long series of presentations about everything from the ground up, starting with geology and hydrology and on through, you know, forestry and land use and everything. So just want to pitch for that. But Judy, I didn't want to stop you because I was so glad to see the depth and breadth of that new website you put together. And you know, folks don't realize the painful process it was for all of us when the OSU switched all the websites. And I'm just glad to see that you've really caught up, and the Christmas tree website is in such good shape because it's the go-to place now. And congratulations. I know what a struggle it was to get it back up to where we wanted to see it. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's a work in progress, and I hope to add more to it. You get busy with field work and then that drops off, but.
So there are some questions for folks hanging around. I'll call this, we're into overtime now, but as far as with Judy and Chal and Gary, folks are saying, you know, thank you. There's a few questions here. Actually, one back about interior needle blight, cause unknown. Seems like a good research project. So that sort of leads to the question of, you know, what else is there we can do to understand interior needle blight? That might be one. Otherwise, I think most of these things are just glad to see the great website you were showing us. So
Let me make a comment about interior needle blight. It's not that the cause is unknown. There's multiple organisms that potentially can cause it. There's several fungi that have been identified that are associated with interior needle blight and stuff. So that and the controls for it and the development of it and the management of it are fairly well worked out. I will make a comment for people who use the disease control guide. I don't know about the weed one or the insect one. You need to understand that those management guides, they list things that are registered for use. They don't necessarily tell you which ones are the most efficacious.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference in some cases. So if you look at some of the disease management ones, there'll be a list of fungicides that are there that are registered for use to control, let's say, Swiss needlecast on Douglas-fir. But some of them are much more effective in controlling the disease than others. And so it's important to do a little more additional work and try and identify that. In some cases, the handbook has put in there that research has shown that this material works better or is not very effective. But I think because of the rules and regulations on how the things are listed in there, if it's registered for a thing, they need to put it in there irrespective of what its efficacy is.
That's a good point. Thanks for pointing that out. I don't think I pointed that out. So yeah, if it's registered, it's in there, but yeah, alphabetical, not best at top.
so what's the best way for people to fine tune their prescription after they see the menu? Call Chal or Gary?
Contact your local extension
yeah, contact
person.
Yep. So call us or consult to get the fine-tuned version of solving your problem. Well, let's see. Are there any other questions or comments at this stage? It looks like I think we're just about done. And I really appreciate having all the three of you together. This is really a great, an awesome collection of expertise here. And this has been recorded, so you can tell your friends about it who missed it. And within, I think, a few days or so, we'll be posting this for folks to come back and find. And that'll be through our probably through Clackamas County Extension, I think, in our website.
I'll put up a link to it.
Oh, that would be good. Actually, that would be the go-to place, would be on your site, I think.
Well, I'll just put a link to wherever you post it.
Okay. That'd be good.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, well, I guess thanks again, everyone, for coming, and thanks, Chal and Gary and Judy, for the presentations.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Night.